The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just like it did every morning. Claire rolled out of bed, her fingers already aching from the late-night practice session. She'd been up until midnight working through the same piece over and over again. But that was her life now. Wake up early, work the morning shift at the coffee shop, squeeze in practice time during breaks, work the evening shift, then practice until her neighbors started banging on the walls. At 28 years old, she was finally taking real piano lessons. Most people started when they were kids, maybe 5 or 6 years old, not her. She'd grown up in a small apartment where there was barely enough money for groceries, let alone music lessons. Her parents had immigrated here with nothing but hope and determination, working 2 jobs each just to keep the lights on. But Claire had always loved music. When she was 13, she discovered an old piano in the basement of her school. It was dusty and out of tune, but to her it was perfect. She'd sneak down there during lunch breaks and after school, teaching herself by watching free videos online and checking out books from the library. Her fingers fumbled at first, but slowly, note by note, she learned. Now, 15 years later, she was still chasing that dream. 3 years ago, she'd started saving every tip she earned at the cafe. $5 here, $10 there. It added up slowly. Finally, she had enough to pay for lessons at the community music center. Her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, was kind and patient. She told Claire she had something special, a natural feel for music that couldn't really be taught. That Saturday morning felt different somehow. Claire had seen a flyer at the music center about a master class at the Grand Concert Hall downtown. A famous pianist was coming to teach and anyone could watch. There would even be a chance for people from the audience to play and get feedback. The pianist's name was Viktor Morozov. Claire had watched his videos countless times, studying his technique, trying to copy the way his hands moved across the keys. He was brilliant, one of the best in the world. But she'd also heard he could be harsh. Some people said he was mean to students who didn't meet his standards. Still, she couldn't pass up the chance. She'd been working on a Chopin piece for months now. It was beautiful and challenging, and she felt like she finally understood it. Maybe, just maybe, she could get up there and play. Even if he criticized her, at least she'd learn something. The coffee shop was busy that morning. Claire poured lattes and wiped down tables, her mind somewhere else entirely. Her coworker noticed she seemed distracted. "You okay?" he asked during a brief lull. "Yeah, just thinking about this thing I'm going to later," Claire said, loading dirty cups into the dishwasher. "What thing?" "A piano masterclass. There's this famous pianist visiting, and I'm thinking about volunteering to play." Her coworker raised his eyebrows. "That's cool. Nervous?" "Terrified," she admitted with a small laugh. When her shift finally ended at 2, Claire rushed home to change. She stood in front of her closet for a long moment, wondering what to wear. Everything she owned was worn and simple. She settled on her nicest jeans and a clean sweater. It would have to do. The concert hall was magnificent. Claire had walked past it dozens of times but never been inside. The lobby had high ceilings, marble floors, and huge chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds. People milled around in expensive-looking clothes, chatting in small groups. Claire felt completely out of place. She found a seat near the middle of the auditorium. The stage looked enormous from where she sat, with a beautiful grand piano sitting in the center under bright lights. Her heart started beating faster just looking at it. At 3 o'clock sharp, Viktor Morozov walked onto the stage. He was tall and thin, probably in his 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. The audience applauded politely as he took a small bow. He sat at the piano and played a short piece, his fingers dancing across the keys with perfect precision. When he finished, the applause was much louder. "Thank you," he said, his accent noticeable but his English clear. "Today I want to work with some of you. We will explore what makes a performance not just correct but meaningful. Music is not about hitting the right notes. It is about touching something in here." He tapped his chest. The moderator, a woman from the local music association, stepped forward. "We'll now take volunteers from the audience. If you'd like to play and receive feedback from Maestro Morozov, please raise your hand." Claire's hand shot up before she could talk herself out of it. Her heart pounded so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She looked around and saw maybe 8 or 9 other hands raised, most of them younger people who looked like serious music students. The moderator pointed to a young man in the front row first. He played a Bach piece beautifully, technically perfect. Viktor gave him some feedback about phrasing and dynamics, mostly positive comments. Then the moderator's eyes landed on Claire. Yes, you in the blue sweater. Would you like to come up? Claire stood on shaky legs and made her way down the aisle. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her. As she got closer to the stage, she heard whispers rippling through the audience. She knew what they were probably thinking. She didn't look like she belonged here. She climbed the steps to the stage, and the lights were even brighter than she'd imagined. Victor sat in a chair off to the side, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Your name? The moderator asked, holding a microphone. Claire. Claire Chen. And what will you play for us today? Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Claire said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. Victor leaned back in his chair. She saw his eyes scan her outfit, taking in her worn jeans and simple sweater. And where do you study? He asked. I take lessons at the Community Music Center, Claire answered honestly. I've been playing for about 3 years formally. Before that, I taught myself. Victor's eyebrows went up slightly. Taught yourself? There was something in his tone that made Claire's stomach drop. Another YouTube pianist, he said, loud enough that people in the first few rows could hear. A few people laughed. Claire felt her face get hot. She wanted to run off the stage, out of the hall, and never come back. But she'd come this far. She walked to the piano bench and sat down, adjusting it to the right height. Her hands were trembling as she placed them on the keys. The piano was incredible. She'd never played anything like it. The keys felt smooth and responsive under her fingers. She took a deep breath, trying to block out Victor's comment, the audience, everything. She closed her eyes. Then she started to play. The first notes of the nocturne filled the hall, soft and gentle like a whisper in the dark. Claire forgot about being nervous. She forgot about the people watching. She just focused on the music, on the story she wanted to tell. This piece had always reminded her of late nights in her apartment, practicing while the city slept outside her window. It reminded her of all the dreams she'd held on to even when things seemed impossible. Her fingers moved across the keys, shaping each phrase with care. She poured everything into it, every hour of practice, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt and hope mixed together. The music flowed through Claire's fingers like water. She'd played this piece hundreds of times, but never on a piano like this. Every note sang out clear and beautiful. The middle section was coming up, the part where things got complicated. Her teacher had warned her about rushing through it, about keeping control even when the emotions wanted to take over. Claire navigated through the difficult passages, her years of practice showing through. Sure, she missed a couple of notes here and there. Her technique wasn't perfect like those conservatory students. But there was something else in her playing, something that came from deep inside. She played like someone who'd fought for every moment at the piano, who understood what it meant to want something so badly it hurt. The final section came, returning to that gentle opening melody. Claire let it breathe, giving each note space to resonate in the huge hall. When she played the last chord, she held it, letting it fade naturally into silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Complete silence. Claire opened her eyes, suddenly terrified that she'd messed up worse than she thought. But then the applause started. It wasn't polite clapping like before. People were really applauding, some even standing up. Claire blinked in surprise, her heart still racing. She looked over at Victor. The smirk was gone from his face. He sat forward in his chair now, staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite figure out. It wasn't mockery anymore. It was something else. Surprise, interest. He stood up slowly and walked toward the piano. Claire's hands were still shaking as she pulled them into her lap. She braced herself for criticism. He was famous for tearing apart performances, pointing out every flaw and mistake. Where did you learn to phrase like that? Victor asked. His voice was different now, softer, genuinely curious. Claire wasn't sure how to answer. I just listened to a lot of recordings. Whenever I had time at work during my breaks, I'd put in headphones and listen. I tried to understand what made the music feel alive, you know? Not just playing the notes, but telling a story. Victor nodded slowly. Tell me about your journey. How does someone teach themselves piano? Claire felt awkward with the microphone near her face and all these people listening, but she told him the truth. She talked about finding that old piano in her school basement, about practicing late at night after double shifts at the cafe. She mentioned studying music theory from library books and watching free tutorials online. She told him about saving tips for 3 years just to afford proper lessons. My parents worked so hard to give me and my brother opportunities, she said quietly. They never had money for extras like music lessons. But they never told me to stop dreaming either. My mom used to fall asleep on the couch listening to me practice. She said it helped her relax after long days at the factory. The audience was completely quiet, listening to every word. Victor stood there, his arms crossed, but his expression had completely changed. There was no trace of the arrogance from before. You know what the problem is with many of my students? Victor said, speaking to the whole audience now. They have had every advantage. The best pianos, the best teachers, the best schools. But many of them do not have what you have. They do not have a story in their playing. They play correctly, but they do not make you feel anything. He turned back to Claire. You made mistakes today. Your technique needs work. Your left hand sometimes gets too loud. You rush in some places, but... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. You have something many conservatory students lack. You play with your heart. You understand what Chopin was trying to say. That cannot be taught from a textbook. Claire felt tears stinging her eyes but fought them back. She'd expected him to tear her apart, to confirm all her fears that she'd started too late, that she didn't belong in this world. Instead, he was saying she had something real. Thank you, she managed to say, her voice cracking slightly. No, Victor said firmly. Thank you. You reminded me of something I had forgotten. Claire returned to her seat in a daze. The rest of the masterclass continued, but she barely registered it. Her mind kept replaying what had just happened. Had that really just occurred? Had Victor Morozov, one of the world's greatest pianists, actually praised her playing? When the masterclass ended 2 hours later, people started filing out of the auditorium. Claire gathered her bag, ready to head home and process everything. But as she reached the aisle, someone touched her arm. It was an older woman, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes. That was beautiful, dear, the woman said. I've been coming to these events for 20 years, and your performance was one of the most moving I've heard. Don't ever stop playing. Thank you, Claire said, genuinely touched. That means a lot. She made her way up the aisle, feeling like she was floating. But before she could reach the lobby, a young man in a staff uniform approached her. Excuse me, are you Claire Chen? The one who just played? Yes, Claire said, confused. Maestro Morozov would like to speak with you. He's backstage. Would you mind coming with me? Claire's stomach flipped. Sure. Okay. She followed the staff member through a side door and down a hallway lined with posters of past performances. They reached a door with a gold star on it, and the man knocked twice before opening it. Victor was inside, taking off his formal jacket and replacing it with a comfortable cardigan. He looked more relaxed now, more human somehow. When he saw Claire, he gestured to a chair. Please sit. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to talk to you privately. Claire sat down on the edge of the chair, her hands gripping her bag tightly. Victor sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I need to apologize, he said directly. What I said when you first came on stage, that comment about YouTube pianists, it was rude and unnecessary. I have no excuse for it. It's okay, Claire started to say, but Victor held up his hand. No, it is not okay. I have become cynical over the years. I teach many students whose parents pay enormous amounts of money for lessons. Some of these students are talented, yes, but many do not appreciate what they have. They show up late, they do not practice, they think success should come easily. And then you walk on that stage, and I made an assumption based on how you looked. That was wrong. Claire didn't know what to say. She'd never expected someone like him to apologize to someone like her. Victor continued. Your playing today, it reminded me of why I fell in love with music when I was a boy in Russia. My family was poor too. I practiced on an old broken piano in a community center. I know what it means to work for something. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. I want to offer you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. I teach a small group of students privately, outside of the conservatory. Very selective. I would like you to join them. Claire's mouth fell open. What? But I can't afford— No fee, Victor interrupted. Consider it my way of making up for being a fool today, and also because I genuinely believe you have potential that should not be wasted. I work 50 hours a week, Claire said, reality crashing back in. I have bills to pay, and I help my brother with his college costs. I can't just quit my job to study music. Victor turned back to face her. I am not asking you to quit. We work around your schedule. Evening lessons 3 times per week, 2 hours each session. You continue working, but you also continue growing as a musician. Claire's mind raced. This was impossible. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Why would you do this? Because talent like yours is rare, Victor said simply. And because I am tired of wasting my time on students who do not care. I want to teach someone who will appreciate it, someone who will work hard. I think that is you. Claire felt overwhelmed. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part was scared. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she let him down? Can I think about it? She asked quietly. Victor smiled for the first time since she'd met him. Of course. Here is my card. Call me within the week. As Claire left the concert hall that evening, the sun was setting over the city. She stood on the steps looking out at the streets below, holding Victor's business card in her hand. Her whole life had just changed in a single afternoon. The question was, did she have the courage to take the chance? Claire didn't sleep much that night. She kept turning Victor's business card over in her hands, reading his name printed in elegant letters. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed the conversation in her head. Was this really happening? Or would she wake up and find out it was all a dream? The next morning at the cafe, she was so distracted she almost put salt in someone's coffee instead of sugar. Her coworker caught her just in time. "Whoa, hey, you all right?" he asked, taking the salt shaker from her hand. Claire laughed nervously. "Sorry, something happened yesterday. Something big." During her lunch break, she sat in the back room and called her younger brother David. He was in his 3rd year of college, studying engineering. She'd been helping pay his tuition since their parents couldn't afford it on their own. "You'll never believe what happened," she told him, and then explained everything about the masterclass. Victor's offer, all of it. David was quiet for a moment. "Claire, that's incredible. You have to do it. But what about money? What about helping you with school?" "I can't just..." "Stop," David interrupted her. "You've been helping me for 3 years. You put your own dreams on hold so I could go to college. It's my turn to figure things out. I can get more financial aid, maybe pick up some extra shifts at the library. You need to do this for yourself." Claire felt tears welling up. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Mom and Dad would want you to do this too. You know they would." That evening, Claire sat with her parents at their small kitchen table. Her mother was folding laundry while her father ate rice and vegetables after his shift at the warehouse. Claire showed them Victor's card and explained the opportunity. Her mother's eyes went wide. "This man, he is famous, and he wants to teach you for free?" "He says I have potential," Claire said quietly. "But it means I'll be busier. Less time to help around here." Her father, a man of few words, set down his chopsticks. "When we came to this country, we had one dream. That our children would have chances we never had. This is your chance. You take it." Her mother reached across the table and squeezed Claire's hand. "We are so proud of you. We always knew you were special." 3 days later, Claire called the number on Victor's card. Her hands shook as she dialed. A woman answered, probably his assistant, and scheduled her first lesson for the following Tuesday evening at 7. That Tuesday, Claire finished her shift at 6, rushed home to change, and took 2 buses to reach Victor's studio. It was in a nice part of town, the kind of neighborhood where she usually felt out of place. The building had a doorman who checked her name on a list before letting her in. Victor's studio was on the 4th floor. When Claire walked in, she gasped. The room was large and filled with light from tall windows. But what caught her attention was the piano. Not one, but 2 grand pianos, both gleaming black and perfect. "You made it," Victor said, emerging from a small office in the corner. "Come, let me introduce you to the others." 3 other students were already there. A young woman named Lee, who looked about 20, and had just finished her degree at a prestigious conservatory. A man named Raphael in his early 30s who'd been playing since childhood and now taught at a high school. And a teenage boy named Ben who'd won several youth competitions. Claire suddenly felt very small. These people were real musicians with real training. What was she doing here? "Everyone, this is Claire," Victor said. "She will be joining our group. Now let us begin. Claire, you first. Show us what you have been working on." Claire sat at the piano, her heart hammering. She played the same Chopin piece from the masterclass. When she finished, Victor was quiet for a long moment. "Better," he finally said. "But you are being too careful. You are afraid of making mistakes. In this room, mistakes are how we learn. I want you to take risks. Play it again, but this time make it bigger. More emotion. Do not hold back. Claire tried again, pushing herself to be bolder. It felt strange, almost uncomfortable. But Victor was right. Something opened up in the music when she stopped being so cautious. Over the next few weeks, Claire fell into a new rhythm. Work in the morning, practice during her lunch break using the old piano at the community center, work the evening shift, then rush to Victor's studio 3 nights a week. It was exhausting, but she'd never felt more alive. Victor was a tough teacher. He noticed everything. The angle of her wrists, the weight of her arms, the way she breathed between phrases. He made her play single passages 50 times until they were exactly right. Sometimes she left lessons feeling frustrated and defeated, but he also encouraged her in ways no one ever had. He told her stories about famous pianists and their struggles. He played for her, demonstrating techniques and showing her different ways to interpret pieces. He treated her like a real musician, not like someone who was just pretending. One evening, after about 6 weeks of lessons, Victor made an announcement. There is a competition coming up. The Regional Young Artist Competition. I think some of you should enter. Lee immediately looked interested. Raphael nodded thoughtfully, but Claire felt panic rising in her chest. I can't enter a competition, she blurted out. I'm not ready. I'm not like them. She gestured at the other students. Victor fixed her with a steady gaze. And why not? Because you did not start at age 5? Because you work at a cafe? These are excuses, Claire. You have the talent. The question is, do you have the courage? That night, Claire rode the bus home feeling conflicted. A real competition? Against people who'd been training their whole lives at fancy schools? It seemed impossible. But a small voice in her head whispered, what if you could? She started researching the competition online. The Regional Young Artists Competition was a big deal. Winners got cash prizes, performance opportunities, and recognition that could launch a career. Past winners had gone on to play in concert halls around the world. Claire looked at the application requirements. She'd need to prepare 2 pieces, one from the Romantic era and one from the 20th century. The deadline was in 3 months. That wasn't much time. The next lesson, Victor brought it up again. Have you thought about the competition? I don't know, Claire admitted. What if I embarrass myself? What if I prove that I don't really belong in this world? Victor sat down beside her on the piano bench. Let me tell you something. When I was 25, I auditioned for a major orchestra position. I had trained at the best schools. I had won competitions. I was confident, maybe too confident, and I failed. I did not even make it past the first round. Claire looked at him in surprise. She'd never imagined him failing at anything. I was devastated, Victor continued. I thought my career was over. But my teacher at the time, an old Russian man, he told me something important. He said that technical perfection is common. Many people can play all the right notes. But the ability to make people feel something, to touch their hearts with music, that is rare. That is what separates good pianists from great ones. He turned to look at Claire directly. You have that gift. I saw it the first day you played for me. Yes, your technique needs work. Yes, you have a lot to learn. But you have something these other pianists spend their whole lives searching for. You play with soul. Claire felt emotions welling up inside her. What if I let you down? You could never let me down by trying, Victor said firmly. You would only let me down by being too afraid to try. So what do you say? Will you enter the competition? Claire took a deep breath. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was crazy. But another part, the part that had kept her practicing on that broken school piano all those years ago, the part that dreamed of impossible things, that part said yes. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. Victor smiled, a real, genuine smile. Good, then we have a lot of work to do. Starting now. That night marked a turning point. Claire threw herself into preparation with everything she had. Victor helped her choose her pieces. For the Romantic era, she'd polished the Chopin nocturne she already knew. For the 20th century, he suggested a piece by Rachmaninoff, his Prelude in G minor. It was difficult, passionate, and dramatic. Perfect for showcasing what made her playing special. But as the weeks went by and the competition drew closer, Claire began to feel the pressure building. This wasn't just practice anymore. This was real. And the higher the stakes got, the more she started to doubt herself. The weeks leading up to the competition were the hardest of Claire's life. She practiced until her fingers felt like they might fall off. The Rachmaninoff piece was brutal, full of huge chords and lightning-fast passages that required strength and precision she was still building. Every night after work, she'd drag herself to Victor's studio or to the practice room at the community center. Her co-workers at the cafe noticed the dark circles under her eyes. Her manager pulled her aside one day and asked if everything was okay at home. "I'm fine," Claire insisted, though she wasn't sure that was true. Just working on something important. But as the competition got closer, something strange started happening. Claire began making mistakes she'd never made before. Simple passages she'd played perfectly for weeks suddenly fell apart under her fingers. Her hands felt clumsy and disconnected from her brain. During one lesson, she broke down completely. She was working through the middle section of the Rachmaninoff, a part she'd practiced hundreds of times. But her fingers kept tripping over the same measures. Again and again she tried, and again she failed. "Stop," Victor said firmly. "Just stop for a moment." Claire pulled her hands away from the keys, feeling tears burning in her eyes. "I can't do this. I thought I could, but I can't. Everyone else at this competition has been training since they were children. They went to the best schools. They have talent and training. What do I have? A few months of real lessons and a dream that's too big for someone like me." The tears started falling and she couldn't stop them. All the pressure, all the exhaustion, all the doubt she'd been pushing down for weeks came flooding out. She put her head in her hands, embarrassed to be crying in front of her teacher. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled up a chair and sat next to the piano bench. "Can I tell you a story?" he asked gently. Claire nodded, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "When I was preparing for that audition I mentioned, the one I failed, I went through exactly what you are going through now. The closer the audition came, the worse I played. My teacher watched me fall apart week by week. Finally, 2 days before the audition, I had a complete breakdown just like this." Claire looked up at him, surprised. "My teacher, old Dimitri, he told me something I never forgot. He said that when we put too much pressure on ourselves, we stop making music and start trying to prove something. We play for judges, for critics, for everyone except ourselves. And that is when the music dies." Victor leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "You are not making music right now, Claire. You are trying to prove you are good enough. You are trying to prove you belong. But here is the truth. You already proved that. You proved it the first day I heard you play. You do not need to prove anything to anyone anymore." "But what if I fail?" Claire whispered. "What if I get up there and embarrass myself? What if everyone sees that I was never good enough to begin with?" "Then you fail," Victor said simply. "And life goes on. You will still be a musician. You will still have your gift. One competition does not define who you are. But let me ask you something. Why did you start playing piano in the first place?" Claire thought back to that dusty basement, that out-of-tune piano, the way music had made her feel less alone. "Because it made me happy. Because when I played, nothing else mattered. All the stress, all the worries, they just disappeared." "Exactly," Victor said. "So tomorrow I want you to do something. Take the day off from practicing. Do not touch the piano at all." Claire stared at him. "But the competition is in 2 weeks. I need to practice." "No. You need to remember why you love music. Go do something that makes you happy. Rest. And the day after tomorrow, we try again. But this time we play for the joy of it, not to prove anything." The next day felt strange. Claire went to work, came home, and had an entire evening with nothing to do. She almost went to the practice room out of habit, but forced herself to stay away. Instead, she did something she hadn't done in months. She called her best friend from high school, Priya, and they got dinner at a cheap noodle place they used to love. "I can't remember the last time we did this," Priya said, slurping her soup. "You've been so busy lately. Tell me everything." Claire told her about the masterclass, about Victor, about the competition. Priya listened with wide eyes, occasionally interrupting with excited exclamations. "Claire, this is amazing. You're actually doing it. You're chasing your dream." "I'm terrified," Claire admitted. "What if I'm not good enough?" Priya set down her chopsticks and looked at Claire seriously. "Do you remember in high school when you used to play piano during lunch? You'd sneak down to that creepy basement and play on that horrible broken piano. I came down once to find you, remember?" Claire smiled at the memory. "You said it sounded like a piano having a nervous breakdown." "It did," Priya laughed. "But you know what? You were so happy down there. Your whole face would light up. You weren't thinking about being good enough or proving anything. You just loved it. That's the Claire who's going to walk onto that competition stage. Not some scared person trying to impress judges. The real you, the one who plays because she can't imagine not playing. That night, lying in bed, Claire thought about what both Victor and Priya had said. They were right. She'd lost sight of why she loved music in the first place. It wasn't about winning or proving herself. It was about the feeling she got when everything else faded away and only the music remained. The next day at Victor's studio, something shifted. She sat at the piano and started playing, but this time she wasn't thinking about the competition. She was just playing. The Rachmaninoff came alive under her fingers. The passages that had been torturing her suddenly flowed naturally. When she finished, Victor was smiling. There she is. That is the pianist I know. The other students had noticed her struggle too. After the lesson, Lee came up to her. I've been competing since I was 10, she said, and I still get nervous every single time. The fear never really goes away. But you know what helps? Remembering that the judges are just people. They want to hear good music. They're not your enemies. They're hoping you'll be great, Raphael added. And honestly, the fact that you're even here, preparing for this competition after starting so late, that takes more guts than anything I've ever done. You're braver than you think. Their kindness meant more to Claire than they probably knew. She'd felt so alone in her fear. The final week before the competition arrived faster than Claire expected. Victor fine-tuned small details in her performance. He worked on her stage presence, reminding her to breathe, to connect with the audience, to trust herself. Remember, he said during their last lesson, you are not playing for the judges. You are sharing something beautiful with everyone in that room. That is all. Just share your gift. The night before the competition, Claire couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through every passage, every potential mistake. Finally, at 2 a.m, she gave up on sleeping. She got dressed and took the night bus across town. She ended up at the old church where she used to practice as a teenager. Back then, the doors were always open, and she'd sneak in to use their piano. She tried the door now, half expecting it to be locked, but it opened quietly. The church was dark and empty, lit only by streetlights coming through the stained glass windows. The old piano was still there, looking even more worn than she remembered. Claire sat down on the bench and just let her hands rest on the keys for a moment. Then she started to play. Not the competition pieces, not anything she'd been practicing, just whatever came to her, old songs she'd taught herself years ago, simple melodies that made her feel peaceful. She played for herself, for the girl she used to be, for every dream she'd held onto through the hard years. She played until the sun started to rise, painting the stained glass windows in shades of gold and red. When she finally stopped, she felt different, calmer, ready. Claire stood up and looked at the old piano one last time. Thank you, she whispered to it, to the empty church, to whatever force had brought her to this moment. She walked outside into the early morning light. The city was just waking up. Somewhere across town, a concert hall was waiting. In a few hours, she'd walk onto that stage. She'd play for judges and an audience full of people who knew music far better than she did. But now she felt ready, not because she was sure she'd win, not because she'd suddenly become perfect, but because she remembered who she was and why she started this journey in the first place. The competition wasn't about proving she was good enough. It was about sharing the gift that had carried her through everything. Whatever happened today, she'd already won something far more important. She'd found her voice, and nobody could take that away from her. The concert hall was packed. Claire stood backstage, peeking through the curtain at the audience filling the seats. Her parents were out there somewhere, wearing their nicest clothes. David had driven home from college just to be here. Victor sat in the third row, his expression calm and encouraging whenever she caught his eye. The competition had started at 10 that morning. Claire had drawn number 17 out of 22 competitors. That meant hours of waiting, listening to other pianists play, each one sounding more brilliant than the last. A young woman named Stella went first, playing a Liszt piece with technical precision that seemed almost superhuman. Then came a man named Owen who played Beethoven with such power the whole hall seemed to shake. One after another they came and played. Conservatory students, competition veterans, prodigies who'd been performing since childhood. Claire sat in the waiting area, her hands ice cold despite the warm room. She tried to focus on breathing, on staying calm, but doubt kept creeping back in. These people were incredible. What made her think she could compete with them? Around 1 in the afternoon, a woman with a clipboard called her name. Claire Chen? You're up in 15 minutes, 15 minutes. Claire's stomach dropped. She stood up on shaky legs and walked to the side stage area. She could hear the current performer finishing their piece, the applause that followed. Then the announcer's voice echoing through the hall. Our next performer is Claire Chen playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, followed by Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. This was it. Claire took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, just like at the masterclass. But this time felt different. There were 5 judges sitting at a long table in the front row, clipboards and pens ready. The audience was much larger too, maybe 500 people. She sat at the piano and adjusted the bench, her hands trembling slightly. She looked out into the audience and found Victor. He gave her a small nod and she remembered his words. You are not playing for the judges. You are sharing something beautiful. Claire placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes. She thought about that church this morning, about playing just for herself. She thought about her mother falling asleep to her practice sessions, about David encouraging her to chase this dream. She thought about every late night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt and hope that had led her here. Then she began to play. The Chopin Nocturne flowed from her fingers like it always had, gentle and expressive. She shaped each phrase with care, letting the music breathe. She wasn't thinking about technique or judges or winning. She was just telling a story, sharing something that mattered to her. When the last note faded, there was a brief silence, then warm applause. Claire opened her eyes, feeling more centered than she had in weeks. 1 piece down. 1 to go. She took a moment to gather herself, then launched into the Rachmaninoff. This piece was different, bold and passionate and technically demanding. Her hands flew across the keys, tackling the massive chords and rapid passages. There were moments where she felt the fear trying to creep back in, but she pushed it aside. She'd worked too hard to let fear win now. The middle section came, the part that had given her so much trouble in practice. But instead of tensing up, she let herself feel the music. She played with everything she had, pouring all her emotion into every note. The fear, the hope, the love, the determination, all of it came through her fingers. The final section built to a powerful climax, and Claire struck the last chord with full force, letting it ring out through the hall. When it faded to silence, she sat very still for a moment, catching her breath. Then the applause started. It wasn't just polite clapping. People were actually cheering. Claire looked up, surprised, and saw people standing. Her parents were on their feet, her mother crying happy tears. David was whistling, and Victor, standing in the 3rd row, was clapping with a huge smile on his face. Claire stood and took a bow, her heart pounding. As she walked off stage, her legs felt like rubber. She'd done it. Whether she won or not, she'd actually done it. The rest of the competition passed in a blur. The remaining competitors performed, some of them absolutely incredible. When the last person finished, the judges announced they'd deliberate for 30 minutes before announcing the results. Claire found her family in the lobby. Her mother hugged her so tight she could barely breathe. So beautiful, her mother kept saying. So beautiful. You killed it, David said, grinning. Seriously, Claire, that was amazing. Her father, always quiet, simply squeezed her shoulder. But his eyes were shining with pride, and that said more than any words could. Victor appeared through the crowd. Claire, he said, and she saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. He looked genuinely moved. That was exceptional. You played with your whole heart. I am very proud of you. Thank you, Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You did the hard part, Victor said. I just helped you see what was already there. When they announced it was time to return to the auditorium for results, Claire's stomach started doing flips again. She sat with her family, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Victor sat nearby with his other students who'd come to watch. The head judge, an older woman with silver hair, took the microphone. She talked about the high level of talent they'd witnessed today, how difficult the decisions had been. Claire barely heard the words. Her heart was beating too loud in her ears. In 3rd place, the judge announced, playing Prokofiev's Sonata No. 7, we have Stella Morrison. Stella walked up to accept her certificate and prize check, smiling graciously. 2 more places to announce. In 2nd place, playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor and Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, We have Claire Chen. For a moment, Claire couldn't move. Second place, her. She felt David pushing her to stand up, heard the applause washing over her. She walked to the stage in a complete daze and accepted the certificate and check. $2,000. She'd never held that much money in her life. But more than the money, more than the placement, was what the judge said next. We also have a special Audience Choice Award, voted on by everyone here today. This goes to the performer who most moved the hearts of our audience. And that award goes to Claire Chen. The applause grew louder. Claire felt tears streaming down her face as she accepted the second certificate. Through her blurry vision, she could see her mother openly crying, David cheering, her father's rare smile, and Victor standing and clapping, looking at her with something like wonder. After they announced first place and took photos, the crowd began to disperse. But several people approached Claire. A woman from a local performing arts center asked if she'd be interested in giving a recital at their venue. A man from a music foundation wanted to talk about scholarship opportunities. A journalist from the arts section of the newspaper wanted to interview her about her journey. Claire felt overwhelmed by all the attention. But through it all, she kept thinking about what Victor had told her. Success isn't about the awards or recognition. It's about staying true to the music and continuing to grow. 6 months later, Claire stood on stage at a small but beautiful venue downtown. It was her first solo recital, the one the Performing Arts Center had offered her. The seats were filled with familiar faces, her family, friends from the cafe, Victor and his students, Mrs. Peterson from the community center, and even some people who'd seen her at the competition and wanted to hear her play again. She'd also received a fellowship from the Music Foundation. It wasn't enough to quit her job completely, but it meant she could work part-time instead of those grueling 50-hour weeks. She could finally balance work and music in a way that felt sustainable. Before the recital began, Claire spoke to the audience. She told them about her journey, about teaching herself on a broken piano, about saving tips for lessons, about the fear and doubt. She thanked everyone who'd supported her, especially Victor, who she called the mentor who saw past her rough edges to the musician inside. For a long time, she said, I thought I'd started too late. I thought success in music was only for people who began as children, who had every advantage. But I learned something important. It's never too late to chase a dream if you're willing to work for it. And sometimes the longest, hardest journeys make the destination even sweeter. As she sat at the piano to begin her program, Claire looked out at all those faces. She thought about how far she'd come. From that scared woman walking onto a stage to be mocked by a famous pianist, to this moment, performing her own recital for people who believed in her. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. And in that moment she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The journey wasn't over. It was really just beginning. But she was ready for whatever came next because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. She'd found her voice, and nobody could take that away.